Building a Well-Architected Review Crew with Generative AI with Alex Kearns. Hey, everybody. What's going on? Oh, where's the button? There's the button. Hey.
There's the button.
Hello, team. Hello, Alex Kearns. How are you doing today?
I am good. I have got a horrible cough, so I'm gonna battle through with the help of some strepsils. But we'll be all good. But
well,
yes,
certainly appreciate you coming on. Battling a cold. We could have changed the date. I certainly don't want to cause anybody any undue stress or concern.
it's not folks to the screen. It's all good.
Folks, welcome back to vBrownBag. I am your host, Chris Williams. With me always is my beautiful co-host, Damian Carlson. Hey, Damian, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Beautiful is not a word that is usually used to describe me, but I'll take it.
Yeah, come on, own it.
It's usually grumpy. But yeah, no, I'm really glad to be back. I think I missed. I don't know if I missed last week or not. I don't know. Time is a construct. Anyways, I'm glad I'm here, and I'm very glad to meet Alex. I haven't met Alex before. He tells me that he gave a tech talk at one of our on-prem versions of the vBrownBag that we used to run at conferences in the before times.
In the olden days? Wow.
Yes. In a previous life in which we were all the same people.
Which conference was this at, Alex?
I can't remember. I don't think that was me.
I thought you just said that you did like a lightning talk.
It was a lightning talk of this session. But it wasn't with you guys.
Oh,
Gotcha.
I misspoke. Sorry, I just assumed you had done a tech talk. Wow.
I should have taken credit.
Damian's like so. He just assumes that we're so popular that everybody has done a talk on all of our shows.
Hey, note, Damian, when you edit this, cut that out. Cut that.
Okay. We'll do the audio signal. There. We'll see that spike in the audio file now, and we'll be like, okay, that's the part where we got to cut it out.
Absolutely. Yep.
Little video editing. Sorry. Anyway, we are going way far off track. If you are in the studio audience and you want to get in on the conversation, feel free to join us on our community. If you at vBrownBag, you can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Twitch, all the things. On Blue Sky, I believe we're at vBrownBag.com, but it's close enough. You'll see us there. And we would love to have a conversation with you. And if you are in the live studio audience, hey, Daniel, hey, team, we will chat with you there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that you might have heard of in the ether is generative AI. It's a thing now. We've heard it's a passing fad. It might go the way of the cloud and the dodo. But until it has passed, we are here with Alex Kearns, and we're going to figure out how we can use this to help with the Well-Architected Framework, which is a framework that is near and dear to my heart. I was one of the OG war ambassadors back in the day when partners would go out and do well-architected reviews and espouse the joy that was this new thing called AWS and why you don't have to build your own data centers anymore. But I have not heard of it. I haven't seen anybody using generative AI to run through the lenses yet. So I'm very excited to see this.
Yeah.
With that, Alex, how are you doing? Where are you at? Where do you come from? And how are you doing?
So I'm based out of a county called Suffolk in the UK. So I'm about an hour on the train or so north of London. So for me, it's just gone 9 p.m. right now, which is why we've got a slight shift in our normal schedule time. But
I appreciate you coming on early and late for you.
Very excited to be here. I've worked in cloud pretty much my whole career, which is now 7 or 8 years probably. But yeah, primarily in cloud consulting, but also with a bit of sort of software dabbled in there as well. But most recently is doing a lot with Well-Architected, which is where the idea for this talk came from.
It is for those of well, actually, I'm not going to say anything about it because this can be part of your talk. So I'm going to shut up. Damian, have you been playing with anything recently that you wanted to share with the team?
Technology wise, I was super slammed. I think it was last week with a demo that I was doing for work, and
Mhm.
it was one of those things that just occupied all of my time. And then once it shipped, I shipped the demo. I had one of those like, what am I going to do with my life feelings, right? Like the skies cleared, my calendar opened up. I was no
Oh.
longer, feeling frustrated with, wrangling my own audio and video and screenshots and video of a product, right? So,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, I was really just kind of heads down working, and then now trying to navigate a bit of a compressed work week, where you do 5 days of work in three for me since I'm taking tomorrow off. But yeah, it's just been one thing after another. I did mention that I was doing some work with MCP
Mhm.
recently on the show, and I'm happy to say that I also have seen some recent articles about security disasters with MCP. So I
Mm.
guess that's good that it's come far enough along to catch on fire in a dumpster. So that means technology is advancing.
It does. Yeah, everybody initially it was MCPs is the next silver bullet, and then it was like, oh, it might be good for guardrails, and then now it's like, oh, it can get way too involved if you don't watch it very carefully. So
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
kind of funny because we've been in tech for a hot minute, and we've seen these cycles getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Like when VMware first came out, that was the silver bullet, but that silver bullet lasted for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Then
Mhm.
then containers and Kubernetes. Well, no, VDI had a resurgence. Then containers, then Kubernetes, and the cycle of belief in a silver bullet to immediately expunging it and turning to something else has gotten a lot shorter now. So
Yeah.
for good and for ill, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Alex, when you said that you've been in cloud for 8 or 9 years, which by the way makes you technically an old person with capital letters.
OLD.
Yes, yes. Uh, were you in technology before that, or did you come straight into the cloud space?
No, I came straight into cloud. So
Wow.
I'm 28, just turned 28. Um, so my first job out of uni was straight into well, at the time it was kind of AI before it was cool. Is the
Hmm.
way I like to describe it. So it was chatbots, it was natural language processing,
Right.
sentiment analysis, all the things that
Hmm.
I guess we kind of take for granted now with Gen AI and large language models. But it was, yeah, doing that as a initially consultancy, but then turning it into a SaaS platform as well for
Yeah.
businesses to build their own chatbots.
I'm just
Um,
ready to say crypto.
yeah, that's one thing I never have touched, and probably never will.
Yeah.
um,
Good on you.
but no, that was kind of the starter for cloud for me. It was the first job really was on paper a software developer,
Hmm.
but the company I joined, it was the three co-founders. They were looking for initially they're looking for a full-time software developer to kind of bolster the ranks a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and I sort of took a shot in my final year at uni and said, I can do a few days a week around my studies. It's obviously going to cost you an awful lot less than someone full time straight out of the job market.
Right.
Right.
Um, and did that part time with them as a contractor for a year or so, and then went full time with that same organization after graduating. But the cloud bit for me was really almost by side effect, because
Hmm.
it was kind of like someone needed to do cloud. We were deploying things to AWS,
Right.
but in the most rudimentary sense, it was, here's an EC2 instance. Let's put some code on it and run it.
Hmm.
Um, Not a lot around the bits that we know we should be doing now, like CI/CD and observability, and just the fundamental bits of software development and software deployment in cloud.
Right.
So yeah, just kind of took on the cloud stuff out of necessity, and found that was really where I loved working.
Hmm.
And from there, kind of pursued roles into cloud specific. jobs. So then went into, I joined BT after that. So a massive company in the UK, but the department I joined was a government contracting department. So they did a lot with UK government organizations and how they might use cloud or might not use cloud in a lot of cases. But I joined with them. It was literally the second day of the lockdown in the UK, so right at the start of COVID. And one of the main reasons I joined them was to get back into the office. So I think in the 1 year that I worked there, I went in the office once to kind of get some FaceTime with people because lockdown has been lifted for a little while, and then once for my exit interview a year later. So that was a kind of weird time. Being government work, it was the usual kind of security clearance required, and all of that just ground to a halt in the UK during COVID. So kind of spent a year not really being able to do the job that I'd kind of been hired to do. And then after that carried on in the cloud consulting space, but data and machine learning again before GenAI, and that was working for an partner, and was there for a couple of years before the role that I'm currently in. I've been here for 2.5 years now, and we kind of started off with migration and modernization, and 2.5 years ago it was again GenAI, large language models weren't really on the scene like they are now, which feels scary to say. I did have to search before we came on today when ChatGPT was released, and it was November 2022.
Right.
And it's
was it 22?
22.
Wow.
And to think the developments in not even the technology, but how much is available to kind of Joe public, not even the sort of the things that would normally be gated to geeks like us, just things that anyone can pick up and make use of is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I find that to be a very interesting journey. I feel like, well, I definitely started at the dawn of the age of virtualization, and then that naturally led to cloud, right? So that's very cool to hear that like your first stop was the cloud. So I guess that makes you a cloud native. And the oldness is
dawn of the age of virtualization.
Well, yeah, that kind of sounds like the age of Aquarius, doesn't it? Like
that's a musical from the 70s, isn't it? It's never mind. I'm gonna stop now.
I wouldn't know, Chris. I'm not that old.
Oh, shots fired.
No, but like back in the early the early 2000s, right? When it was like, hey, we can turn all of this hot metal just to being on one machine, right? So that's very interesting, and I guess it also makes sense how you've also kind of adapted the use of AI technologies to the well-architected review.
Yeah, I mean,
and that was my attempt at a really cool segue.
For me, I don't know if I'd say I was a skeptic, but it was probably for the first 6 to 9 months or so of ChatGPT being out. It was a little bit of a kind of bury your head in sand moment, because you've sort of seen, even over the last 3, 4, 5 years, technologies kind of come and go. Not necessarily in cloud, but just things like, I don't know, when you used to go to the movies and 3D movies used to be like the ultimate experience, and now it's really hard to find a 3D movie, let alone a 3D TV at home.
Right.
And then things like Web3 and crypto and the things that were kind of pitched as these are going to revolutionize everything, but 6-12 months later they are kind of seen as memes in a lot of cases. It's probably only only after the first, like I say, 6 or 9 months of ChatGPT being out and really starting to use it more, not necessarily professionally, but just personally as well, that it was a bit of a light bulb moment of actually this probably is going to be here to stay.
Yeah.
If I stick my head in the sand, I'm going to get left behind.
For sure.
Well, with that, why don't we, Alex, are you going to share? Do you have a screen share?
Yeah.
I do. I have some slides, which are very, very brief, just as a bit of a context setting.
Cool.
And then we'll go into a look at some code and also a live demo.
That's the best part.
Pray to the live demo gods that I don't get the same capacity issues I got last night when I tried this.
The live demo gods have actually been a lot more picky with ChatGPT, because sometimes we get the answers that we did not expect. When temperature is set too high, we're like, oh, it's not supposed to say that. How many developer hours has GenAI saved you versus cost? Oh, okay, we got Mike the Man is in the audience. We'll get to some questions afterwards. But do you know how to share on StreamYard?
I do. Let me just reorganize these screens so I don't share the wrong thing.
I'm going to go over to Twitch and make fun of Mikey real fast.
Okay, we should be
$1 million.
Hopefully some slides.
There they are. There we go.
Lovely. Yeah, I'm going to keep this super informal. Last time I kind of gave this content, it was a 10-minute lightning talk, and that incorporated the live demo as well. So it can kind of go as fast or as slow as it needs to through this content. If there are questions people have got, then happy to answer them throughout. I'll just have to rely on Chris and Damien, because I can't see the chat anymore with this full screen.
Oh, we'll take. Don't worry about that. It's just our usual cadre of peanuts chattering right now. Cool. Yes, Mike, I called you a peanut.
So, yeah, this is what we're here to talk about today. We've seen lots of use cases or lots of uses rather, of generative AI over the last couple of years. I think everyone's seen use cases in personal and professional lives, but actually the thing that I've been trying to focus on most is what are those use cases that are not novelty, and that's the feedback I've always hoped for from talks. Is this was a use case for AI that didn't make me cringe, and hopefully we'll come to the same conclusion today. Just as a very, very quick intro to me, we've covered a lot of this already. My day job is a principal solutions architect working for a AWS consultancy based in the UK called Devoteam. Love doing these kind of things. Really, really passionate about the AWS community and just community in general. So part of a variety of AWS community programs. Kind of met Chris through the user group leaders program, community builders program. Been in that for 4 years or so now. And the ambassador program is specific to AWS partners. Always happy to chat about things. So feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. And all my content is kind of related to Well-Architected in one way or another. And it's all published here at wellarchitectadvocate.com.
And a lover of coffee, my man.
And lover of coffee. If you could see my desk right now, it would be slightly embarrassing. But that was very good coffee. That was in Rome, I think, actually. Not quite the same as coffee from the shop down the road. 3 things that I want to kind of cover off before we get to any code and before we get to the live demo. So we're going to have a look at what problem it is we want to try and solve, how we build a solution, and then finishing up with that live demo at the very end. So what is it that we're trying to solve? For those of you who kind of don't know, the AWS Well-Architected Framework and other cloud providers also have frameworks that are kind of helpfully also called Well-Architected Framework, is a kind of cloud service provider authored set of best practice, design guidelines, the things that they think you should do in order to architect your things in the most sensible way possible, and make use of their services in the most sensible way possible. The one area I always had a bit of a complaint with kind of the well-architected frameworks has been best practice for one person doesn't necessarily mean best practice for another, or rather realistic best practice for one doesn't necessarily mean realistic best practice for other. And that's something where I think the use of generative AI could be really interesting, being able to kind of contextualize best practice and say, kind of in my situation where money is an object and I'm constrained by budgets, then is, I don't know, running my own certificate authority, which might be best practice, actually the best thing to do? Or would this suffice to meet the security requirements I've got, say? So my problem statement for what I've tried to solve is that when you assess a workload against the well-architected framework, it often requires deep and specific knowledge of each of the pillars. So in those pillars, you've got security, sustainability, operational excellence, performance efficiency, sustainability, and cost optimization. Often in larger organizations, so kind of customers that I might work with more often, you'll have SMEs for each of these pillars. So you might have a security team, you might have a team that's kind of closer to the finances and the FinOps functions, teams that are there to deal with incidents and take care of the operational side. And these can help you remediate the gaps. But when you're in smaller organizations, it's really expensive and really tricky to do this, because they haven't got that luxury of here's a person or a team of people for each of the pillars. It's actually here's a person who looks after our cloud stuff, much like I was that person in my first job. Trying to do this at scale, in terms of a scaled AWS estate without scaling people is really hard. So for me, it was about how do we find the efficient, how do we use GenAI to unlock this for us. So in terms of building this solution, I kind of broke it down into 3 steps, really. So my animations are a little bit broken here because I've changed this talk a couple of times since I first gave it. But you'll see the secrets before I get to them. First step was kind of preparing the knowledge bases. So within generative AI, retrieval augmented generation or RAG is a great way to be able to build up a knowledge base and query that information, giving more context to the large language model when it's making decisions, when it's generating its response, and ultimately making recommendations for us on how to remediate something in the well-architected framework. In our crew of well-architected agents, each of them needs specialist knowledge. So similarly to how in an organization you'd have a team of people who kind of know security inside out, you wouldn't expect the finance team to have that deep knowledge of this particular framework needs to take off these boxes in order for us to be compliant with it, in the same way that you wouldn't expect a security team to understand the difference between, I don't know, unblended and blended costs when they're dealing with AWS finances. And as such, it made sense to build up knowledge bases and agents per well-architected pillar. What I wanted to do was build an approach where data could come from many different sources and go into a location that's kind of easy to query and easy to work with. So the first iteration of when I built this, I actually put together this talk in its kind of first incarnation for a conference with Airbyte, who do this really, really nicely. But actually, since then, the advancements in Bedrock knowledge bases has meant you can pull from an awful lot more sources than you could when it first came out. So when it first came out, S3 was kind of the only place you could really pull data from. But now you can take it from all over the place, which makes it a really flexible way to do the kind of embedding or generating embeddings from content and storing it in a vector database in a really managed and easy way. So we load our documents into S3. In my case, I can show you what they look like. They are just PDFs. They're white papers from AWS on particular topics. The Bedrock knowledge base service takes these from S3, uses the Amazon Titan text embeddings v2 model to generate the vector embeddings from the content in those PDFs. And it loads it into distinct namespaces in Pinecone. So I chose Pinecone for my vector database primarily because of cost. Pinecone have a free offering, whereas obviously things like OpenSearch Serverless and Postgres you have to pay for. Whereas the Pinecone free one is great for demos and natively supported in Bedrock knowledge bases as well. When it comes to actually building up the crew of agents, there's loads and loads of kind of agentic AI frameworks out there. As is always the case when something new comes out, people launch open source ones. Some of them get traction, some of them don't. And when I looked at most of them, they're all kind of more than I needed for what I wanted to do a bit of a POC with. So to start with, what I actually did was I built my own. And it was a really, really simple Python framework. It was a class that you could add agents to. You'd give the agents descriptions. And then when the query is sent to that particular class, it will give a large language model a prompt to say, these are your choice of agents. Given the query, decide which agents you want to pass it on to. And it's really, really lightweight and worked kind of well. It worked, but didn't give me a lot of extensibility. And then I think just shy of a couple of weeks ago, AWS launched their own. So this is still in, I think it's like version 0.1 at the moment. So it's super new, but it's the AWS Strands SDK. And it was the closest one I found that actually was kind of backed by a sort of a big name, I suppose, that's going to continue to invest in a framework that was really, really simple to get going with. So last week, when I was kind of refining this talk and doing dry runs of content, I switched over what I built to use the AWS Strands SDK, and it actually gives some really, really nice improvements that we'll see in the live demo. And I think it's got an awful lot of promise because it's backed by AWS. They're going to continue to invest in it, hopefully, but also the way that it handles choosing agents is quite interesting. And we can look at the logs that it generates and see how it interacts with different agents and kind of loops back on itself to ask more detailed questions without you having to go back and ask follow-ups, which is is quite cool. But essentially, it's a really simple flow. So you start with your prompt. You start with the question you want to ask. So it might be, how can I improve security of my AWS cloud application that uses EC2 instances and RDS clusters for databases? That gets passed to something that routes to the relevant agents. In order to work out which agents to route to, of course, it has to go off to a large language model to understand from your prompt and given the descriptions of the agents, which are the most appropriate. Then the relevant agents go and do their thing. In the case of the one that I built, it would kind of be a one-shot basis. So the agent would go off, generate a response, and then come back and return that response. Whereas with the AWS Strands SDK, it's got some quite nice kind of recursion almost in it, where, like I say, it will go back and ask more detailed questions if it thinks it's missed anything to answer the original question. This can go off to different data sources, so knowledge base that we've built up, and of course, using that same large language model. I tried this with Claude for Sonnet last night, and it was very, very good and very, very fast. But I ran into some throttling issues quite a lot. So I've had to revert back to 3.7 for the demo today. But yeah, quite excited to see what leap we take with version 4 of Claude, because the responses that came back were pretty amazing. And the final stage was, how can we make this kind of pretty-ish? I'm by no means a front-end designer or front-end developer. So the goal was, let's try and make this as easily consumable as possible without investing loads of time in building a fancy UI. So I used Streamlit, and this gave us something that was really nice and quick, but also functional, nicely laid out, and simple to use, which is the most important thing. So what we'll do, we will give it a go, have a look at logs. We can dive into the code as well, and if I'm brave, make some changes to the code and see what impact it has.
You're brave. You're brave and you're strong. You're going to do this. This is going to be amazing.
Right. So we'll start off in AWS. So I've got a couple of knowledge bases set up here for just two of the pillars. So one is for the sustainability pillar, and one is for the security pillar. There's no reason this couldn't scale to all six. I have these knowledge bases set up to go to S3, and within my S3 bucket, I have got two folders, I suppose we'll call them, but there are prefixes which say these are the security ones and these are the sustainability ones. So when those get loaded into there, the knowledge bases feature in Bedrock does what it needs to do, generates the embeddings, and loads them into our Pinecone index, which is our vector database for this particular example. So you can see here we've got two different namespaces, so I can then isolate the queries from each other, which is a nice way to do it, because it then means that you're kind of limiting the results that come back to the specific content that is not just most relevant, but the kind of curated content, I suppose, that's is going to be relevant. So rather than running the risk of, is there a chance that some sustainability content might come back when I'm looking for security content, we can scope our queries to just this security namespace, and that's exactly what the knowledge base does. So we've got it set in here. which I don't think actually shows you in the view. When you set up your knowledge base, you can say, this is the namespace that I want you to A, write data to, and B, query data from. So I have two kind of demos as part of this. So one is just a fairly simple question and answer, in the sense of it will take our question, it will send it off to the relevant agents and return back a response that has been built up by multiple agents, multiple queries, knowledge bases, and give us what we hopefully will want the answer to. The other one is our kind of developer mode. We can, again, ask a question, but this time we can give it a CloudFormation template as well. So we're starting to give it a bit more context. And this time it can make specific recommendations to say, kind of based on best practice and my understanding of CloudFormation, these are the areas you need to improve on, potentially even suggest some code examples for how you can change that. And then what we'll be able to see in here is we'll be able to see the kind of the debug logs, and as it comes through, the tools that it's using as well. So if we start off here with a question of, let's go for something like, I'm building an application that will run on EC2 and requires a database as well. What should I be thinking about from a security? This will go away and do its thinking. What we can then see in our logs here is we're starting to...
Can you increase the... there you go.
We'll start to see the different agents kind of getting loaded in. So we're going to start, I think, from probably here is where we've just started. So what it's going to do is it's loaded in, it's found our two agents that have been defined, and I'll show you the code once this demo is done. The Strands SDK is obviously still quite new, quite, I don't want to say immature, because it does do an awful lot, but it isn't the fastest. It does a lot of kind of, like I say, recursion over making multiple calls to Bedrock, multiple calls to knowledge bases, and that does then take up quite a lot of time. But you can make it faster by doing things like running tools in parallel. So what you can actually see here is if we... So this is our initial query here. So it's passed that to our security agent. It's worked out that actually that security agent is required for this particular this particular case. But you'll notice that the initial query that we sent is different to this. So our initial query, excuse me, mentions sustainability as well. And what it's done is when it's passed that on to the security agent, it's scoped it down to the bit that's most relevant. So this is still going to run through these. It's queried our knowledge base, and again, it's adjusted that query to pick up on, okay, what are the keywords? What are the things it's going to be most likely to pick up on from the querying of that vector database? So now it's looking for, okay, security considerations for EC2 and database applications. And then, again, to go a little bit deeper, database security, EC2 authentication, encryption, data protection, doing things where it knows it's talking to a knowledge base, because that's what I've put in the description of the tool. So it's adjusting its query. And this is all part of the AWS Strands SDK, which is super cool. And then finally, kind of going through things like network security, and then also identity and access management. So we'll let this run through.
While that's going through it, Mike, the man live, has a question. How reproducible are the results on each invocation of the process?
In its current configuration, it's the content and the essence of the content is pretty similar, but the way that it presents it might not be. So the recommendations might still be the same, but it might format it in a slightly different way, or it might suggest it as rather than being like, here's everything relating to encryption, it might say, here's all of the compute recommendations, and here's all the database recommendations, and encryption is kind of nested somewhere in that.
Right, but you could tighten that up with adding things to memory, or making the prompt, giving it examples of format outputs in the prompt.
You can do everything you can normally do with querying Bedrock directly, rather than using the Strands SDK with this as well. So you can go in and say, I want to adjust kind of top K, I want to adjust temperature, make it a little bit kind of less creative. So we can now see that my account does not spend enough money on AWS, clearly. So it's just kind of hit some throttling exceptions on there.
Well, you have all those sweet CB credits. What are you doing, Alex?
I know.
Assume the role of a Python security software engineer and answer the never mind. Mike the man live is a Python security software engineer. So I am once again making fun of him.
This looks like it has given us a response now. So it gives us a response to say, based on responses from the security and sustainability agents, here's what you should consider for our EC2 application with a database. This is all coming from, or primarily from, the white papers we've given it here. So we have given it one that's specifically about cryptography on AWS, one about security on AWS, and the generic well-architected security pillar white paper 2. So it's given us all of those sort of generic recommendations you would expect when you ask a generic question like that. And interestingly, you go into sustainability, and it then gives you what you'd expect to see around sustainability in terms of graviton, in terms of right sizing, using the right database services in order to kind of reduce the wasted effort on doing things.
Right.
But the nice thing you then have with this is, if we take a look at how these kind of agents get built up. So the security agent, for example, I have a tool here for this agent, which is called kind of query knowledge base. You can add kind of as many tools as you want to this, and this is really the only kind of syntax you have to implement to do what you want it to do. You decorate the function with this app tool, and then pass it into the agent as a list of the tools that are available, and that's kind of all there is to it. So it uses your doc string as the description of what it is that the tool is able to do. You can give it loads more information than I've given it here. You can give it examples of how it should respond, whether it should respond in Markdown, in JSON, YAML, whatever you want it to. But yeah, there's some really nice stuff that you can do with this SDK. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kick off this one as well whilst we talk about some other bits. So I've got a template here, which it's a pretty awful template, really. It's got open security groups, IAM roles that have got power user access for managed policies as well as full access for inline policies. Everything you would expect to get flagged up by a person who knows something about security. Public S3 buckets, like.
Okay, so this is pretty slick. My next question after you finish the first one was, okay, now what I want to do is I want to take my existing environment and slap it in here and have the well-architected review run against it. So that's exactly what you've done.
So what I can do now is I could say, they give me recommendations on how to this application. And then what this will do is this will, all being well, use a different tool. So this will pick up on the tool I've built for analyzing CloudFormation templates, again with inside this security agent. You may find it still uses the tool to get knowledge from the knowledge base, to understand what is best practice. But this basically will take a CloudFormation template, build it up into a very simple prompt. We give the model a system prompt to tell it what to do. And again, this is the most sort of basic prompt engineering I could probably possibly do. It's pretty rudimentary in terms of the instructions that I'm giving it. You go into normal.
Sure, but you could beef this up. Yeah, exactly.
And then all it does is invokes a model via Bedrock and then returns that result. And then what happens is it's this kind of orchestrator agent that's able to kind of consolidate everything, but also understand which agent should go where. And again, that's where you can give it some clarification around things like, this isn't a conversational application, it's a question answer one and done. So giving it those instructions to not ask follow-up questions, because that's something we saw quite a lot. But these are the sort of things you could automate. You could make it quite easy to extend this and automatically add like these 2 lines here into a prompt based on some documentation somewhere. But there's lots that this SDK is able to actually do now, even though, like I say, it's still 0.1.5 now. But it comes with a load of kind of inbuilt tools. So you have things like running Python code. So it can obviously generate Python code with a large language model, and then a tool that will run it for you, or integrating with third-party services like Slack or APIs. All of these things that are kind of very much in the AWS mindset of, here's your building blocks, here's your primitives. Now kind of go and piece them together how you want them to work. I think that's the one thing that working primarily with AWS and seeing a little bit of other clouds has proven is AWS kind of tend to focus on the let's do lots of things in isolation very, very well, and let builders build, let them put things together, let them kind of have the best of everything, rather than it being here's a one-stop shop to do something, but all of these features aren't really great. So these tools in here are really nice. It's something that I haven't properly explored yet, but given that this has only been public for 2 weeks, exciting to see.
Yeah. They've done a bit of work for 2 weeks. Agreed.
Yeah. How is this doing? Cool. That has done. So you can see, obviously, we've asked about security and we've asked for code examples as well. So it's picked up on issues with our security group, obviously allowing all traffic from anywhere, giving us the exact code examples we need to use in order to go and make the changes and fix the problems. Same with the IAM roles. And this is where it kind of starts to, I guess, blend that line from, okay, what is assessment of a architecture against the well-architected framework, and what is kind of remediation of it. So I've seen, I think AWS probably have some published samples now of sort of slicker, well-architected framework reviewers. But the bit that I think is kind of most interesting is, as these models get better and better at writing code, if you can feed them with like all the CloudFormation documentation, for example, and that is something that maybe things like MCP can help with, then being able to go from, here's your well-architected review, you've given us some justification as to why you have to have, I don't know, this EC2 instance in a public subnet. Like, it's not best practice, but we've had to do it because they're the bits that I think GenAI and large language models will be really, really good in the process. And also that second step of, here's how you can actually go and fix it now in the context of your code, your repository. And this can be extended, right? This you could give it a link to a GitHub repo, and it could go and clone that repo and run this across the whole set of templates, not just one you're uploading. Or even I did some stuff with like security hub findings as well. So built a version of this that was, here's a ARN for a security hub finding, and here's a GitHub repo that has a template in it somewhere that defines the resources that's being flagged up by security hub. Now go and tell me what changes I need to make. And yeah, it's that. Well, ultimately, it's the shifting security left. All the things that people should be doing, but perhaps aren't.
Should be doing.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about the opportunities that, I guess, generative AI in general gives us in cloud. I think it obviously brings with it lots of challenges. I think, I'm sure I saw there was, this came out end of last month, of people who are building generative AI workloads on AWS. There is now a GenAI lens that will review how you are operating your GenAI workloads against best practice. So not necessarily using GenAI to review it, but there's no reason why you couldn't. But thinking about things like, okay, what are best practices around security with GenAI, things that are specific to these particular workloads that you wouldn't have with other software deployments.
Like, have you accidentally killed a human in the past 2 days with your wait?
But
it's architectural questions. Did you accidentally build Skynet? If so, you have failed your well-architected review.
Yeah. So would you use this as a starting point, or kind of double checking your work? I mean, how would you think about this sort of thing? Because I would hope that it wouldn't completely replace the human thought process.
So I think it's in the past when we've looked, I guess, as an organization, at where we can use kind of automation in well-architected before generative AI was kind of where it is now. It's always been very static. It's always been like, has your EC2 instance got an open security group? Yes. Fail. Like, that's quite often there's a reason for it. There's a okay,
Right.
well, actually, it's a VPN. It has to be in a public subnet because it needs to be publicly accessible. That's something that the automation without AI hasn't been able to do a lot of. I don't think it removes humans from it. I think it's a sort of double-edged thing of maybe it can do a first pass of a review. It can look at, I don't know, here's your CloudFormation template, here's your AWS CDK repository, make recommendations on where you're not doing things perhaps as you should. Could it be something that goes as part of a kind of the software development lifecycle and sits in a pull request and comments on things when things don't look like they're going to be particularly secure, or when things look like they're going to cost a lot of money?
Yeah.
So I think there's the using AI to give more awareness of things, and then there's the other side, which is the kind of fixing it side of, okay, we detected that this isn't quite right, whether it's post deployment or whether it's pre deployment, but actually this doesn't look like it's best practice. Here's code. Here's, I don't know, if AI gets to a point where we're that confident in the writing of the code, maybe it could go and do the pull request and actually say, well, here's the commit, here's the change.
Right.
Kind of, again, not removing the human out of the loop, but just acting as a sense check.
Yeah.
I think there's, it's the usual thing of, is AI going to replace people's jobs as software developers? And I think the answer probably is no, but it will definitely dramatically change what people do. It will, significantly impact where people spend their energy.
Yeah.
So, like that template here, for example, this was the result of, I don't know if I can. Yeah, this was the result of me saying, write a CloudFormation template that provisions an EC2 instance with a security group open to the world. I was like, I know I'm not going to deploy this template, but chances are there might be a little bit of syntax in there that's not perfect, but it, on a first pass, it looks like a CloudFormation template that will work. So in this demo case, I used AI to generate this example template, and it looks like it would work. I haven't tried it, but I think that's the kind of the areas where, if it can get you 80% of the way there, and you can then do the sort of the sharp end of tasks as a human, then that's where the value will come. Excuse me.
Yeah.
That's where the value will come from. I don't believe it's going to replace anyone.
No, I don't either, and I tend to agree. It's likely going to drive us higher up the stack in terms of how we think about and how we implement whatever it may be. Right? Like, there was a time when racking and stacking servers in a data center was something that I got paid six figures to do. Right? That's not really the case anymore. Now it's you get paid six figures to architect a cloud service or something like that, and that racking and stacking is almost like a fungible thing that someone is doing, but that's not that's not a highly paid job anymore, right? So I think that AI is going to remove a lot of that like lower level thinking and just kind of drive us higher up into the orchestration and the planning and things like that. Um, Something akin to how libraries, programming libraries meant that we could stop reinventing email or time or something like that with every program we wrote, right? It did take away that function or that job, but it freed us up to do the next thing. So yeah, I tend to agree with you. And by the way, Alex, your video is frozen in
Yeah, I just saw that. I'm gonna.
yeah. Yeah. Mine froze and crashed earlier.
I thought he was just being very still and keeping his eyes closed. I don't judge.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
While he's getting that sorted, though, we do have another good question from Mike.
There we go.
Do you think that there's a risk that using GenAI for CloudFormation templates and IAM policies would subtly allow unintended behaviors, missing something that a trained human might have caught?
I think absolutely. It's that usual thing of how much trust would you place in anything automated? Like even if it wasn't AI, even if it were a completely kind of robotic process, a lot of things still have human gates in them for quality. Because whilst obviously AI is particularly susceptible to things not coming out quite right, certainly things like any software, like people introduce bugs, things get missed. All of the zero trust is a great way to actually describe it. It is that idea of use it to its full extent, but it's all pinch of salt. It's all know the limits, I guess, of what the systems we're working with are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like what's the vibe coders? I mean, yes, it will build something that does something, but it's not going to create a production ready, hardened system with architectural considerations put in place. Because you're not. It's like Kyle Reese says, you never trust the machines. That might be too old of a reference for you, Alex. That's from the Terminator. That's an old movie from way back in the day. Kyle Reese was the protagonist. Never mind.
Yes, in which the AI was the bad thing.
What? That's crazy talk.
I think it's one of those technologies where you're looking at how far it's come in 2.5 years now. And the benchmarks are again, pinch of salt. I tend to go for kind of gut feel with a lot of these things, which is where when I tried out Claude 4 and saw the kind of difference in results and difference in speed, it's like I don't need a benchmark to tell me that this is better. Like the responses giving me feel more correct, even if I can't necessarily measure it. But I think it's the measure, I think, is how ingrained it gets in daily life. It's like 2 years ago, I would have never have thought about using AI or using anything in my job for doing things like making meal plans, or like when you go out to a restaurant and if you track calories or anything like that, and you're like, there's no calories on this menu, I don't know like what to put in my MyFitnessPal for the day to know whether I'm over under whatever.
You can do that. I didn't even think about that. I use MyFitnessPal too.
I go on like ChatGPT and say, I've been to an English pub, I've had fish and chips, here's a photo of the portion size, give me an estimate of calories. And it may be miles off, but it does, feels about right.
I'm totally going to do that. That's amazing. It's like, I'm in America. Oh, you by being in America, you immediately add 1,000 calories to each meal.
Yeah, it's and that's the kind of then it's getting ingrained in just your day-to-day life. There's no gate of no gate of you have to spend thousands of hours or anything like that anymore. It's just part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's becoming much more pervasive now.
The point I think that we're not quite at yet, but is definitely approaching, is the point at which developers who aren't using AI assisted IDEs or Copilot kind of extensions end up being left behind and moving too slowly compared to everyone else. And we're not quite there. But I've found just like I tend to rotate between like Cursor and Windsurf and Amazon Q
Right.
kind of almost on like a monthly basis, because they each bring out features that look attractive each month.
Mhm.
And they're all changing, but it's using Cursor at the moment and kind of using again Claude 4 in that, and it's again not necessarily using it to like vibe code or anything like that. It is just as I'm writing normal software or writing CloudFormation templates or Terraform, it's that step ahead, and the kind of the magic of we think you're going to type here next.
Oh, did you put it in Terraform template into? I saw CloudFormation, but then you said Terraform. Have you had it do Terraform yet?
It will do Terraform.
Mhm.
I just have to change the system prompt to not be specific to CloudFormation.
Right.
But I have done in a previous incarnation of this, I did it with CDK for Terraform,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that worked really nicely.
Very
Because
cool.
all kind of strongly typed as well, and gave a bit more hints on what can be done. But yeah, it's a pretty rudimentary demo, but I like to use it as a bit of a kind of this is what's possible.
Mhm.
There was one question I saw that came in right at the start.
Yeah, but it was Mike's, so you can ignore it.
Was it
Which
the
was
one about the
How many
reproducibility?
how many developer hours
Yeah.
has GenAI saved you versus cost?
That one.
This particular talk, or this particular content, there's not nothing that we've actually quantified. About to get a hello from my cat. But the one of the other talks I've given on GenAI has been around using GenAI to analyze old PHP scripts. So this was part of a migration and modernization for a customer, and with that particular one, we had 250 old PHP scripts that were all running as cron jobs, and they were all kind of, most of them were like 300 to 400 lines long. They weren't nice PHP scripts. They were like your 2004, 2005, everything's in one file, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is yeah, before my time, I'll say. And we worked out through, I guess, primarily through extrapolation, that analyzing these scripts by hand would have taken sort of circa like 2 to 3 weeks. And that's before you start taking into account things like you've got to give some kind of poor person, a poor solutions architect, a task, say, for the next 3 weeks. All you're going to be doing is reading PHP scripts line by line and documenting them, which is a horrible task, right? Doing anything that kind of monotonous isn't fun. So we built something with GenAI to do it, and at the end, what it would do is it would generate a a JSON object for each PHP script and say, these are the dependencies, databases, APIs, other scripts that it might include, all the things that would potentially be blockers as part of migrating them to what ultimately be Kubernetes cron jobs. And they all got spat out into JSON objects, and we then flattened them out into CSV so we could filter them nicely in Excel. And that whole kind of job probably took about an hour to run, and cost about $5 in Bedrock model charges.
Yeah.
We probably spent a day maybe building a solution in the first place. But when you're kind of talking about the sort of developer hours versus cost argument, in this case, it was kind of almost for the customer in that they got 2 and a bit weeks extra, I suppose, in their migration, which 2.5 weeks of consultancy in cloud obviously works out to a decent chunk of change. And that was a great example of actually this is where we really can just speed things up. And
right.
We gave a lot of those, I think we gave about sort of 15-20% of those results to a human on the customer side and said, can you just like give me the once over, do a bit of a kind of litmus test to make sure that actually we are on the mark for these. And they were pretty much bang on. And this was before Claude 3 was released. So the accuracy you get from them now would be even better.
Yeah.
Very cool. Nice. I just realized that we are massively over time.
Yeah.
and this is like late in the evening for Alex, and he's got a cold. So why don't we go ahead and wrap? Alex, thank you so much. The winner for this week's vBrownBag prize is Daniel Seifert. I ran the drawing in the background because we were chatting and I didn't want to interrupt with the prize. So Daniel Seifert, congratulations. Give me a ping either on LinkedIn or I'm mistwire.com on Blue Sky. You can find me, DM me. I will hook you up with your prize, which is $50 in AWS compute credits. And Alex, you need to get some sleep and a lozenge. Thank you so much, and your cat too.
It's empty now.
Did you go through the whole pack while you were talking?
No.
Okay. No, we're not raffling off Alex's cat next. What's your cat's name?
Bell.
Oh, Bell. Okay, I love cats. So, I could go on and just look at the cat, but I'm not going to do that. Alex, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Have a wonderfully. Oh, the demo, the code. Is it on GitHub?
It will be once it's tidied up. Yeah.
Okay. So if you would get that to me, I'll put that in the show notes for YouTube so that viewers in the future will be able to access the demo and play with it themselves.
I can pop the slides in there as well.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Cool. Awesome. Well, everybody, have a wonderful evening. Alex, thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you all again next week. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.